We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back with Liberty Nation senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner. Now, earlier in the show, Tim and I were discussing the GOP primary contest and how that's heating up. But now it's a question of will they or won't they? Only their hairdressers and perhaps the DNC knows. Now, Tim, the Democratic National Committee is overseeing the primaries that are or are not taking place. I think that's the question, isn't it, Tim? Is there going to actually be a primary season for Democrats?
There is no real primary season, but Iowa and New Hampshire, the first two contests ordinarily, what they're going to do is where they're threatening to stick with their position in the face of Joe Biden sort of unilaterally moving the whole process so that South Carolina goes first, because South Carolina was where his dead presidential campaign came to life in 2020. So he's got a special place in his heart for South Carolina, plus it highlights his support among Black people. And so he just pushed his way in and essentially declared, with the support of the Democratic National Committee, of course, that South Carolina would go first. That's upending a long-standing historical tradition. And in fact, in New Hampshire, you're statutorily required to hold the New Hampshire primary, according to state law, 1 week before any similar contest, which means any other primary. Of course, the Iowa caucuses go first about a week.
Tim, let me interrupt you there, sorry. So if Joe Biden goes ahead and the DNC go ahead and they hold the first official or unofficial primary in South Carolina, which as you say, it's really a photo opportunity to show, oh, look, Joe Biden, he's so popular with minority voters, therefore. Right. I mean, that's what it is. But if New Hampshire, as you say, according to their own state laws, goes ahead 1 week before, what's the DNC going to do to New Hampshire and Iowa?
They have threatened to strip Iowa and New Hampshire of their delegates to the Democratic National Convention, which, to me is pretty much a slap. The hardest slap on the wrist they could give, I guess. But considering Joe Biden is a sitting president who's, unless he drops dead or pulls out, is certain to get the nomination, so there's not exactly any kind of drama surrounding it. But they have said they will strip those. Now, whether that means the entire state of its delegates or whether they will substitute delegates in their place assigned by
fake electors, for example, one might say.
Well, here's the thing, that Biden thought, as most presidents do, that if he says something, people will snap to and follow suit because he's the leader of the free world, right? So, but Iowa and New Hampshire saying not so fast, because, of course, they have the future to think of and their traditional standing of going first. So we're in a position here where they could hold those primaries, and the winner, the Iowa would hold the caucuses anyway. New Hampshire would hold the primary anyway. And probably Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wins in both places, and Marianne Williamson, the new age gadfly who's running for a second time, she'll accumulate a lot of votes, if only because there's nobody else even recognized on the ticket. So Biden could be dealt a double portion of embarrassment by actually losing in Iowa and New Hampshire, even though, of course, eventually he will win the nomination unless he drops out.
There's a word that I'm thinking here, and it's that this whole process of stripping out the delegates from certain states while those states are trying to select who they want to be their nominee, it seems undemocratic, which is a little strange for a party that's called the Democratic Party, isn't it, Tim? Isn't that a little ironic, would you say?
Well, if you remember the song from Damn Yankees, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. Well, basically, when you're president, whatever the president wants, the president gets. But the only problem is that statewide Democrats, just like statewide Republicans, don't like to be dictated to from on high. They have their own independence as a state unit that is not beholden to some unilateral
Tim, that's called
necessarily.
equity, and every Democrat worth their salt should be supporting it, right?
It also brings in diversity because there's 50 different states, and it brings in inclusion. So it's diversity and equity and inclusion to let to let the states have a say at least, or even decide what the order of primary should be, what the schedule should be.
So that's not even the only issue with the Democrat primary so far, though, is it? Because there's also talk about not holding primary debates. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., I believe he's polling, it varies somewhere around 17 to 21%, depending on which poll you go, if you take into account the margins of error. But he looks like he's going to be able to get the small dollar donations from a range of places, from a number of people, plus he's polling significantly. And yet the DNC is saying no primary debates.
Well, look, if I was Joe Biden, I wouldn't want to debate either. And frankly, from a political standpoint, he should go nowhere near a debate, especially in his case, because he has everything to lose and nothing to gain. People aren't going to say, ooh, Biden was really impressive against that guy.
Some would say he could gain legitimacy.
No yeah, well, he's already president. So, look, I also think there's a strong case to be made from a political standpoint that Donald Trump really shouldn't be debating those other candidates either. When you have a massive lead and seem almost certain to win something, why would you debate? All it can do is bring you down. So, it's nice for Republicans to say he should debate RFK Jr., but the fact is, no president really in a similar position would have agreed to debates against candidates who are not really mainstream. Now, RFK Jr. is, because of his name, he is a very serious person. He's a real person of substance and content if you listen to him. But he is not in the Democratic mainstream with so many of his views. And so he's, I suppose, somewhat like Liz Cheney in the Republican Party, where she is way out of the mainstream. In her case, of course, she has a loud voice. But in the Democratic Party, it's, it'll be waiting for Godot for the day that Biden agrees to debate RFK Jr. And by the way, Marianne Williamson, talk about elevating someone to the level of credibility. If you put Marianne Williamson on the debate stage with the sitting president of the United States.
Well, she has books to sell. And in the last 30 seconds, Tim, do you think there's going to be a Newsom surprise out from the West Coast?
I just don't see how, even though it makes so much sense in so many ways, he's so young and handsome and articulate, glib, really is the word for it. And he even is clever enough, for whatever reason, to say nice things about Donald Trump, of all people, because of their association during the pandemic. But I just don't see it. I don't see it with Biden running, because it would cause a schism in the party. And Biden would probably lose. And if Newsom wins, I don't see it happening with Biden remaining in the race.
Tim Donner, thanks ever so much.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
And that's about all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio American Network. I'd like to thank our guests, Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, and Tim Donner for joining us here today. And of course, I extend my thanks to you, the listeners, for taking the time to tune in. One final thought to leave you with this week. The European statesman Otto von Bismarck, he once noted, people never lie so much as after a hunt, during a war, or before an election. And I think we all fundamentally understand that the promises and the hopes that are instilled in us by politicians' sweet words, or the saviour words that Aristophanes once remarked towards, we can demand either truth or action, but we're very, very unlikely to get both. Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.